Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading for Friday, February 12th, 2021. It might actually be going up on Friday if I can get all of this finished with quickly, so let's go. So my reading schedule continues to go apace. The first thing I finished this week was Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, which I talked about last week. This was a popular novel that was published a few years ago, and I'm realizing it was an appropriate read really for Black History Month in the US because the story follows a family for 8 generations. It starts in what is now Ghana with 2 sisters, half-sisters, one of whom is sold into slavery and one of whom marries into a little bit into the British and into a slaving tribe, and then stays in Ghana, or the country that will become Ghana, for 8 generations, whereas the family in America starts as a slave family and then goes through a lot of the events of African American history. I thought it was very powerful overall. It's a book that has a lot of hype, a lot to live up to, and I thought the writing was strong. I thought his short stories, it worked pretty well. That the characters, a lot of times they were within constructs that were sort of stereotypical is an odd word, I suppose, but they lived within systems of abuse and systems of power. Having to do with what the countries were going through as we went through the generations. I do think the characters, existed beyond, what they were living through. They had personalities as well, some more than others. And, it was sort of a drawback of the book that, you don't get to know the characters for very long. So, character is a major way for me to feel invested in a story. And, none of the characters lived very long because, we're going generation by generation. But still, it gave this sweeping epic feel of what family really means and what history really means, like when it comes to what you live through. And the African American experience is tragic in a lot of ways when it comes to slavery and when it comes to other events of discrimination, but especially slavery and how it dissected families so that you were cut off from your roots. And then the Ghanaian storyline had a magical realist element where sort of what was kicked off in the first generation was sort of a curse set around fire and set around, well, shockingly, human rights abuses. Who would have thought that in this story? And those events sort of live on through the generations to follow, so that even when, people's names are lost to history, there's sort of a mythology around the family and things sort of keep coming back, and there's talk of curses and, more access to the African religions and magic and that sort of thing than there is in the African American storyline, although those storylines, of course, deal with sort of the effects, the built-on effects of each generation dealing with systemic racism, often violent systemic racism. So yeah, I think it's a powerful story, and it showcases a lot of what real people had to go through, as lived through by, well fleshed out characters. So it's compelling in a lot of ways, and I think it was worth the hype. I think readers would get a lot out of this story. Next, I started reading Scissors, Paper, Stone by Martha K. Davis. This is the book I picked earlier in the week when I did my page 112 tag, and I pit page 112 of this book against 2 other random books in a video I will link down below. This is a book from a small press, well, I guess a small to medium-sized press on the West Coast in California, Red Hen Press, and I'll link their page down below as well. I think it's a very strong novel. Something that people beyond the world of small presses should give attention to. This is a story that takes place from 1964 to 1985, basically, where we're following 3 female characters. A woman, Catherine, who's in her 20s in 1964, and she and her husband decide to adopt a baby from Korea, Min, who is another narrator. As time goes on, It was a contentious move at the time, recently after the Korean War, it's not something that white America was that involved in, and from the off they meet a lot of resistance, especially from Catherine's family. And then when Min takes over the storytelling as a young girl, and she's met with racism, which is then compounded by the fact that she comes out as a lesbian. So a lot is going on for her. And the third character we're following is Min's best friend Laura, and they have a very close relationship starting when they meet like in 5th grade up until about 10 years later when they are college aged. And then they go on a road trip in the part 2 of this story, and I think it brings a lot of things to a head about the things in their relationship and their growing up and their sexual awakenings and sort of that sort of thing. I mean, as I said before, I'm a character-driven reader, and I feel like these characters are all very complex. Like, Catherine is like a progressive in her own way, but she also has her shortcomings, and Min is struggling with ideas of sex and race and not necessarily feeling at home in the world that she's in, and Laura is also struggling, in a less promiscuous way than Min is, as she is trying to figure out what she wants out of life and love, and also has parents who have their own set of problems that I think imprint on her life as well. That being said, I guess the only thing I'm truly struggling with is that it doesn't feel like a cohesive story in a lot of ways. These 3 narrators, especially jumping several years between chapters. I mean, it feels like what Catherine was going through in the first chapter as a 20-something woman sort of rebelling against a conservative family is very different from what Min is going through and what Laura is. I mean, theirs seem more connected because they're in each other's lives. When they're narrators, they're, self-centered teenagers always talking about each other, basically, and going through their sort of sexual and otherwise awakenings largely together. And then for Catherine, it's like we get to know who she is and who her family is, but then they kind of drop off of the scene for a lot of the story until things are very different for Catherine when she becomes a narrator again. So I think that's the only thing that might be holding me back from giving this a 5-star, maybe. Because otherwise I'm thinking a lot about these characters and what they're going through, but I wish the story were a little more cohesive. But anyway, I have made a lot of progress so far as it is. I'll be finishing it up relatively soon, and I guess I'll give some final thoughts next week. And then next on my docket is a very different sort of book and a chunkster. We're going into nonfiction and biography. This is Radical Wordsworth, The Poet Who Changed the World by Jonathan Bate. So a biography of the poet William Wordsworth. I am reading this for the octafinals of the BookTube Prize, where I am officially judging nonfiction Group F, and will not be saying anything more about this book because of that judging process. I'll just link to BookTube Prize information down below. So that about covers it for me now. My tentative plans are to try to read the Wordsworth book, or a vast majority of it, over the 3-day weekend coming up, because it is President's Day on Monday in the US and I don't have to go to work. That being said, my mother's birthday was on Wednesday, and accordingly she'd like to, see the family, and I would certainly love to see her too, and, give her a gift and all of that, but it would mess a bit with my reading schedule. Oh boy. Is it more acceptable to be concerned about that, considering I'm reading for a prize rather than just myself? I don't know. And another problem is, or possible problem, is that there might be snow in the DC-Baltimore area tomorrow. So, we've kind of been on and off with that and with ice, and so travel might be a little more tricky. So I guess I'll have to see. I don't know exactly what my weekend plans are yet, but I'll at least be getting through a little bit of that book, I hope, after finishing Scissors, Paper, Stone. So, yeah, those are my plans for the weekend. I hope all of you have good ones as well, and I will be back on this channel later next week to do an author's answer video. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.